Emmerdale character Paddy continually tries to protect Bear Wolf's welfare, though he doesn't always handle situations perfectly. The village veterinarian has faced one crisis after another since Bear came back from Celia Daniels' farm. He first helped conceal Ray Walters' killing, then worked to stop Bear from revealing the truth, and later had to cope when Bear admitted everything to the authorities. Bear has now been granted bail, so he remains in the village while awaiting trial. At the start of the latest episode, he caught Paddy and Mandy Dingle off guard by announcing he had scheduled another appointment with his therapist, Lucy. Paddy and Mandy saw this as meaningful progress. Hoping to avoid any setbacks, they made a pact with Dylan Penders to keep the details of Ray's burial hidden from Bear. However, as Bear walked along the street, he noticed Laurel Thomas speaking with Charles and Claudette Anderson. Claudette called him over and inadvertently mentioned that Charles and Laurel were heading to the Chapel of Rest. Bear firmly insisted on accompanying Laurel. Inside, she softly said farewell to Ray and reflected on how his life might have turned out differently if Celia hadn't taken him in as a child. The psychological impact of the grooming and abuse led Bear to believe he shared a genuine bond with Ray, and he became tearful while saying his own goodbye. Meanwhile, Paddy and Mandy learned from Claudette that Bear had gone with Laurel and Charles. Paddy was livid and immediately confronted Laurel when she returned. When Bear came back, he seemed composed, though visibly affected by the visit. He stepped into the back room, leaving several villagers whispering about whether Laurel and Bear should have paid their respects. Paddy unleashed his frustration at Laurel, accusing her of allowing Bear to bid farewell to the man who abused him and whom he ultimately killed. As his anger escalated, he didn't notice Bear entering the room. Bear told his father to stop and defended Laurel, reminding Paddy that no one truly understood what he endured at the farm. He explained that saying goodbye to Ray, the man he killed without fully grasping the reality, was something he needed to do. Hurt by Paddy's judgment, Bear said his father ought to feel ashamed. Events take a darker turn for Beowulf next week, when he disappears once more, highlighting how urgently he requires professional support. With the possibility of jail looming after he breaches his bail terms, Paddy devises a strategy to stop his father from being locked up. The big question is whether his efforts will succeed. Bear has been unable to recover emotionally since taking Ray Walters' life. Paddy has explored countless ways to help, yet nothing has truly made a difference. Earlier this week, Bear pleaded with Manpreet Sharma for strong pain relief, similar to what Ray once supplied. She declined, explaining that because of his history with dependency, prescribing more medication would be inappropriate. Instead, she recommended non-prescription remedies and additional therapy sessions. Unsatisfied, Bear admitted himself to hospital to have his injured hand treated, only to discharge himself shortly afterwards. Following a confrontation with Jacob Gallagher, he vanished, leaving everyone unaware of his whereabouts. In the coming episodes, Bear remains missing, and Paddy grows increasingly fearful about what might have happened. Scenes will show Bear distressed and fearful as he staggers along a quiet country lane, keeping out of sight from passing cars, clearly at his lowest point. Paddy searches through the night, but finds no trace of him. Matters worsen when D.S. Walsh arrives, informing Paddy that because Bear has violated his bail conditions and allegedly attacked Jacob at the hospital, his situation has become far more serious. Walsh warns that once Bear is located, he will be taken into custody and kept on remand. Devastated, Paddy becomes determined to reach his father before the authorities do. Continuing his search, Paddy eventually tracks Bear down at Anya's graveside. Bear appears disoriented, isolated, and overwhelmed with despair. Paddy gently persuades him to get up and guides him back to the car, but he withholds the information from D.S. Walsh that Bear has returned home. Instead, Paddy forms a new plan to prevent his father from ending up behind bars. Resolute in his mission to protect him, he offers to fund a stay for Bear in a secure mental health facility. Whether this arrangement will satisfy Walsh, and whether it will finally provide Bear with the support he so clearly needs, remains to be seen. Viewers are speculating that Graham Foster may be manipulating Joe Tate as part of a bigger scheme, and that his comeback could be driven by a concealed objective. Since resurfacing in the village, Graham has insisted he wants to make amends with Joe, who once regarded him as a father figure. Audiences will remember that Graham was believed to have died in 2020, before it emerged earlier this year that he was in fact alive. Joe has struggled to process the shock after years of mourning. In order to rebuild trust, he has effectively demanded that Graham prove his loyalty by working for him. Graham has since taken on the role of obedient supporter, with Joe warning that he will cut him off completely if he fails to stay on his side. However, Graham's allegiance appears divided. As he spends more time with Kane Dingle during Moira Dingle's legal nightmare, he has shown clear discomfort with Joe's ruthless tactics. Joe has been attempting to force Kane and Moira to sell their farm, even orchestrating Moira's legal troubles by framing her in connection with criminal Celia Daniels. Moira was subsequently charged with double murder after the bodies of Celia and trafficking victim Anya were discovered on her land. With Joe intensifying pressure to seize the property, many villagers, not just the Dingles, have been appalled by how far he is willing to go. Graham has openly criticised Joe's behaviour and has quietly offered advice to Kane, raising eyebrows among fans. This has fueled a theory that Graham is not truly backing Joe at all, but instead working against him from within. Some viewers believe he deliberately regained Joe's trust in order to gather evidence and ultimately destroy him. Others suspect his ultimate aim is to uncover proof that Joe framed Moira, protect the Dingle family's farm, and expose the truth at the right moment. According to the theory, Graham will eventually reveal that his loyalty to Joe was an act all along. As one fan suggested online, Graham may extract a confession from Joe about setting Moira up. Another predicted that Graham's apparent obedience is simply part of an undercover strategy, and that there was a significant reason police released him without charge earlier this year. Whether Graham is genuinely redeemed or carefully plotting Joe's downfall remains to be seen. Emmerdale reveals whether Vinny and Lewis are over, after surprising scene. Emmerdale saw Vinny Dingle and Lewis Barton get together this week, finally sharing a kiss after plenty of build-up. But tonight's episode showed them at risk of hitting the rocks already. Are they really over before they really began? The latest installment opened with Cami Hadid popping over to the Barton house and congratulating his mate on having finally smashed your way out of the friend zone, a term that Ross wasn't a fan of. Their conversation was interrupted, though, when Lewis walked into the living room and promptly left the house without saying more than a few words. Vinny, who had just beamed about how he finally felt like he understood who he was, looked completely deflated. Cami and Vinny then turned up to the cafe looking for Lewis, but Nicola King told them he was on a stock run before prying for the gossip. They didn't say anything to her, but after she went off to make drinks, Vinny confided in Cami about how confused he felt after the morning. "It looks like he regrets it," Vinny bemoaned, but Cami said it was just Lewis being Lewis, and that if he wants to know exactly what's going on, he just needs to ask. "I'm not sure I'll like the answer," Vinny said. Lewis explained that he really was late for work, and that was taking up all his focus, explaining, "That's the way I work." Coronation Street airs on ITV1 on weeknights at 8:30 p.m. and is also available to stream on ITVX, where viewers can catch up on recent episodes or watch additional content online.